So hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Rainer. I'm the host and founder here of the Mindful Tech Leaders community, Fellowship of Mindful Tech Leaders. And I'm happy today that there is again a very good talk in terms of the topic where Vivek will be sharing some insights and ideas on, especially in these times, I think getting teams in together in all this uncertain climate and things that are happening, I think is a very important challenge for tech leaders, building up confidence and helping them to, yeah, support them as leaders in this setting is pretty cool. And I'm definitely eager to learn more about this topic. So in terms of the structure of this meeting today, similar in the Mindful Tech Leader meeting, what we do is usually we have about 15, 20 minutes, or even a little bit longer, 25 minutes, like a discussion, presentation, right? In this case, where Vivek will be presenting, sharing some ideas. Questions usually are okay and are actually encouraged to make this also more like a conversation, right? And then afterwards, we'll also go a little bit more into some of the topics, questions, and doing a little bit more deep dive. I usually have at least one or two questions that pop to mind, but it might also that others also have more questions. So I definitely, I hope it will be a good discussion afterwards. We have total of 40, 45 minutes. I usually try to stick with the time, but if it runs a little bit longer, that's fine is for me as well. Good. So with that said, I welcome again Vivek. And Vivek is currently engineering leader at Zalando here in Berlin. And basically, maybe Vivek, introduce yourself a little bit, and then I think we can get right into the topic.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm happy I'm in a good company of leaders here. Some of them I know personally, so I'm really happy. Before I just introduce myself, what I'm going to do is I'm not a big fan of using presentations, but I think because this is being recorded, I chose to create some slides just to kind of present my thoughts. But I'm also have an article written about it, so I can share the link with all of you after the talk, and you can also comment and continue the conversation there. I hope all of you are able to see my screen. If it's a thumbs up, thank you. All right, so the topic for today, and I'm not going to hide on the left side the screen, so you can always know that I don't have too many slides with me. It's quite limited. So the focus is on the conversation and discussion. So the topic that I reached out, Rainer, for today was about a personal story and experience over the last 1 year. I think 8 months now. Uh, we are all in this situation together, and what I found was some of the insights that really pushed me into bringing this topic here, because I think this is important, and we are going to live with this crisis for some more time. I would not say that I'm already there and I know everything about it, and that's why I thought of bringing to this wonderful group here to really encourage and this discussion and find out some ideas from this group. But I want to start with two things. So the two topics that we talked about is reflection and gratitude, and I want to bring these ideas to share with you so that you can bring your teams together in the time of crisis. So Rainer asked for a short introduction. So I am an engineering leader at Zalando. I know some of you, Arman is also in some Zalando. I also host a podcast called In Your Shoes, which I started during the time of Corona. And I have a lot of almost 15 years of experience. I lived in a lot of different parts of the world and arrived in Germany 3 years back for Zalando. Fun fact, I'm an active practitioner of Sundoku. If anybody knows what Sundoku is.
Reading multiple stuffs at the same time.
You're quite close, but it's little not that ambitious. So it's basically a person who collects a lot of books, but doesn't have time to read all of them. So that's the Japanese word of not a book collector, but a person who just appreciates collecting and reading and collecting these books, but never gets a chance to read everything. So that's why I'm an active practitioner of Sundoku. All right. So I want to just jump in into the topic. I want to start with not a history lesson, but just to correlate and tell you how all this is connected. So when I look at the current crisis, I am able to go back in history from the text I read long time back about three other different events which kind of felt the same in terms of the impact. So obviously, most of you are aware of it: Spanish flu, Cold War, the financial crisis of 2000, 2008, and obviously the current COVID-19. And the reason they are connected, in my sense, obviously there were crises, but they had some commonalities in terms of the effects. So a lot of you already know there's job loss, industries are being impacted. Also in countries, developed countries as well, there's a decline in consumption and spending. People are choosing to save, and hence the GDP is being the gross domestic product is being affected. More importantly, there's also uncertainty on when this is going to end. We don't know. And also there's no reliable information source. There's always lack of information, and all this compounds to create a sense of fear. I hope all of you feel the same and also are aware of these aspects of the current crisis that we are in. But I want to look at the human part of these effects. So if you look at the human part of these effects, the job insecurity, and sometimes the perceived job insecurity, so people may not even lose the jobs, but this perception increases the probability of a reported self-reported health being poor. And this is factored as part of research. So I have links which I can share with you where they did the analysis in all these events, from Spanish flu to the Cold War and the financial crisis 12 years back, that people have this perception of job insecurity and reporting that they have a poor health. People also kind of shared sleep disturbances, mental distraction, attention disorders, and being able to not cope up with the work that they have. And it applies to people at different stratas of society. People who are very well off, gets great economic and financial setup, to people who are obviously at the lower end of the society in terms of trying to find money for running every single day of their lives. The third point, which is also important for the context that we're going to talk about, is a deterioration in self-esteem. So people really felt differently about themselves, and they have a pessimistic outlook about the future that is about to come. And the reason for me to share these three things is I think we are in the same situation. I don't want to raise the alarm. I think a lot of people have done, media, politicians have done enough to kind of raise those alarms. But I feel all these three aspects, which are commonalities across the incidents or the crisis of these four points in time, affects individuals, the people and teams that you work with on a day in, day out basis. I have summarized three telltale signs which I saw or I heard from people on a day-to-day basis on how this affects them. So the first sign is, obviously, I think most of you would feel that we are never sure when the work time ends. And this is quite common, right? Because you're sharing your physical space where you live, your personal life with professional life. It's harder for some to really have a clear separation between the work and personal lives. And it's harder for people who are probably living in a big city like Berlin, like Bangalore, or the other parts of the world that you work with, where you're working in. And they may be occupying a small apartment, living with their extended family, kids. And now they have to share these lives with them, both the work and obviously personal lives. Um, in an ideal environment where people chose to work remotely, that's their decision. So they can decide to segregate their lives and they can manage it. But obviously, with the current crisis, all of this was forced on people. So now they have to live in their small apartments, need to kind of work on the schedule that they have for the business, and also share life and sometimes balance all of it at the same time. Especially, for example, people with kids and elderly members of the family. And this is what I see on a daily basis, right? I think some of you may correlate and also see this in your work lives. The other aspect I saw was interactions are becoming very transactional. And what I mean by transactional here is pure exchange of information. So for example, if I need to talk to someone, I need to set up a meeting, or I need to go to their chat and schedule a discussion, and they join in, and we transact information. I can't read their non-verbal cues. Everything has to be explicit, and they have to be structured. If I speak, they need to, they should not speak, and reverse. So it's almost like we are building an internet protocol of people talking to each other, how we created machines. So the transactional nature destroys essentially the non-verbal cues. And don't get it wrong. I think remote work is great, and I think there are teams and people who have done an enormous amount of work and done really in a well way on online through remote work. But I'm referring to people who hadn't had the experience of embracing the remote environment. For them, it's a new reality, and now they need to do this transaction. Otherwise, they can't work. And these transactions and interactions being transactions really creates challenges for leaders to really figure out what's really happening. The last part, and I want to underline this, is a feeling of isolation. So you are on your own. I am here with my place, figuring things out, not working with extended group of people, but I'm still on my own. And I want to underline this because if you're really in a physical environment, and people who hadn't had experience with remote usually have this rituals in a physical space. So people come by and say hello to you, or sometimes they will ask for your coffee, or they will ask you for lunch. They'll check with you how things are going. And both introverts and extroverts need presence of people. And what I heard, and also when I spoke to my teams and other people, I felt that almost everyone has a sense of they are on their own. Yes, they have a set of people that they work with, but they essentially feel that they are in a corner, obviously because of the structure that they are in. And I spoke to introverts as well, people who call themselves introverts, and they feel the need of being with someone, even just to get validated that they're part of a group. And that is now part of only rituals like stand-up meetings and catch-ups and meetings. So I think there is also a sense of this isolation which is growing. And I feel these three telltale signs, and there may be more as we go further in this meeting today, we can identify that. That really stood out for me as something that I feel we as leaders need to really acknowledge and do something about it. So with all the gloomy picture and the bad things that are going on, I want to go into more positive side of how we as a leaders can really embrace this situation and focus on what we can do in our position to help the people that we work with and embrace and empower our teams with this new reality. So the first step, as I said, the first step is all about acknowledgement. You acknowledge that every person in your team has their unique stories, unique challenges, unique struggles, and they react to it also uniquely. I think for most of you, this would be obvious. Yes, this is unique. But this came to my realization because we, as leaders, we often put people in buckets, and it's a mental shortcut to really navigate the world and the diversity of people that we work with. But I want to underline this aspect of reacting uniquely. And to support this part, I want to go into the psychology very briefly. So there's a great book called The Complete Enneagram. It is about self-awareness, reflection, really thinking deeply about your position in the world and how you think, the habits that you have. And one of the topics that really resonated with me in this book and why I brought this up here is called dimming of consciousness. As you can see, I kind of quoted the part here. The dimming of caution is essentially talking about a basic survival mechanism that all of us have, which basically says that when we run into crisis, when we run into pain, what obviously as a survival mechanism, we want to save ourselves. We want to stay safe. And what we do with that is our mind, or some part of the mind goes to sleep in order to disassociate this pain. And the way it does that is through creation of habits and coping strategies. Let me give an example. If a child has always been raised in early years of their lives as someone with authoritarian parents or authoritarian siblings, they essentially get later part of their lives this coping strategy of avoiding conflicts and being perfect and trying to being perfect. And this is very common. Um, so this is one example of coping strategy. And this coping strategy are really powerful because they're almost like mental superhighways. So you don't need to decide, they come in automatically and they can help you to survive. But these are really great instruments when we are into crisis, and we always not in crisis. So we are not always facing a tiger in savannah. So we don't need to run all the time. But because of this innate dimming of consciousness, which happens for everyone, it builds these habits and coping strategies. And where I'm leading with that is each one of us has this unique habit or habits and the coping strategies, and they get manifested more prominently in crisis. So if someone's, for example, my personal coping strategy is really to think deeply about things or being worrying about stuff, it builds anxiety. But I think about stuff, I overthink about things, and this manifests more when there's actual crisis, because that's where the survival strategies and the coping strategies really work. And the reason this is important as a leader is we need to realize that each individual on our team, the group of people that work with, have their own coping strategy on how they perceive and react to a crisis. And these are innate habits. These are built in. So what's the first step? The first step that I saw, and I want to keep it very short so that we can go into discussion, is how can we as leaders coach the people that we work with or our teams to really self-reflect on, to recognize what are these coping strategies which are at work during crisis times. And how do I do that? So let me take my example. So when I work with my teams in a one-on-one form or in as a coaching exercise, when I talk to my people, I ask them, when do you look for support? And how do you know you need support from someone if you're stuck with something? What is that situation? I ask them about how do they think about a problem when it occurs to them, and how do they think about sharing with these other people? What is their thinking process about it? One of the other things which really came to me is from my interactions with some of the people I worked with, other leaders I worked with, is my own habit of sometimes talking too much and really not coming to the point. But it's a coping strategy because either I'm nervous or it's a strategy for me to really avoid conflict. So I started talking too much, and the conversation I want my boss or my leaders to have with me is, am I able to reflect on when these coping strategies are activated? Can I look back in the last weeks and the month when I had a vivid memory of this coping strategy? So this is where I think this is the first step, because it really establishes first that everybody has a unique struggle and a coping strategy, even yourself as a leader, and allows you to really work with your team members and coach them to really figure out what is the coping strategy that they can recognize. And please consider this, that this whole self-reflection is a very individual process. and not many of us would be interested to share with our leaders or other people. So it's a very delicate and very personal space. So the idea is not for the leaders to really go into that territory and behave like a therapist, but rather leave this question and let them reflect and talk about how does that make them feel, the whole point of self-reflection. So what I do is I ask my people, my team members, to take this question, take time, think about themselves. They don't even to share with me, but what I love to them to do is share how they felt and what was their process to reflect on this with others, with their peers in the team. And this really normalizes this behavior that everybody is coming with different place of thought and a coping strategy, and also allows individuals, the other members, to feel that they can do that. This is a process, because this is not easy. Self-reflection is really hard. It takes time, it takes practice. So if they find their peers are doing it, if I am doing it and I share my process with them, it establishes normalcy. It establishes that this is possible. So as first step, I feel and I want to really embrace this, is coach your members, your team members, to really self-reflect, to recognize what is the coping strategy at work. And as I said, I do it in a one-on-one way. So how did it feel to self-reflect? What was their process to self-reflect? And we get a chance to talk about it in probably informal manner with a group, where they don't have to go into what was their coping strategy because it's their personal space, but rather, how did it feel to reflect? What was their process? Did they journal? Did they talk to their, people the closest to them, for example, their spouses or their parents? And this really establishes a pattern amongst people, among the group of people here, to say, okay, this is your process. Maybe I can try that, because everybody's journey to self-reflect is hard and it's different. The other activity, and essentially I call it exercise, which I really embrace, is called the group activity called Gratefulness. So once in a month, me and my team meet an informal Zoom or Hangouts group, and we talk about what are the things or people that we were grateful for. So not just people in that room, it could be anyone, it could be things, it could be a physical event that they were grateful, and share with everyone. And this is also very much not very optional to people. If they would like to, they can. If they don't want to, they don't need to. And what it manifests is, and I want to quote someone from my team, is they really felt that in the model of working in a transactional environment like remote work, we sometimes forget celebration. We sometimes forget celebrating things and celebrating other people. And this moment of gratefulness, when they come together and sharing it, really brings back that thought. So I had one of my team members who said that, I'm grateful for someone in a different team who really helped me. And they shared with the group, and next week they went out, wrote a short note to that person. And that person was completely surprised because they were expected. And he reached out to me and said, I really felt good, because all this time I was feeling like I'm doing stuff, I'm being credited for what I'm doing, but I really felt somebody reaching out totally unexpectedly, surprisingly, and sharing this with me. So this feeling of gratitude and doing these exercises really stood out for me as, really an improvement to what we had done. And it also increased strong team bonding. So I can really back it up with data, with experiences from my team and the people I have seen they opt using the same kind of modality in their teams. But I want to leave with these two things. One is the sense of leaders to really help coach your team members to self-reflect. And obviously it starts with you as a leader, so you walk the talk. And the second part is to really open up and ask your team members to share what they were grateful for. And that really connects everyone. So my last thoughts before I end. This is also something I learned from other people outside my organization, but really powerful. So never to underestimate the impact of checking in and checking out. So for example, if you're going to a longer discussion, maybe a team meeting of an hour, if you have that, always check in, spend some 5 to 10 minutes to let people come in. And sometimes I do that by asking my people of what feelings or emotions they are bringing to that meeting, very briefly, and also optional for people. If they want to, they can share that. And the checkout is what emotions and feelings they are taking out from that meeting. And the reason I mentioned this as to not underestimate, because just go back to the times where we're in physical space. You're moving from one meeting room to another meeting room. You're probably going to a physical floor or changing, you're taking an elevator or taking the stairs. So you are actually having a physical activity of moving out of one environment to other environment, which you don't have. All you have is screens. So we never get to do a physical check-in and physical checkout. But if you do that as part of your engagement or discussion or meeting, it resembles, even briefly, this whole check-in and checkout. So potentially what happens is you don't take the baggage from one meeting to the other. You don't take baggage from what you have discussed in a team or in a group to probably something that you're writing code or writing a document. Everything is distinct. And lastly, this is something I learned in a hard way. It's not about you as a leader. It's always about them. So don't feel or beat yourself that, hey, I want to really do it good. I want to really help my people. Because then you're becoming selfish. You're really trying to feel that you have to be the person to solve this problem for them. And then it creates more problem because, again, everybody's journey is different. Everybody's perception is different. Everybody's coping strategy is different. So it's not about you. It's about them. Create that space, the environment, and the time, and lean back. So this is all what I wanted to share with you. A full essay is there on Medium. I have the link and I can share with you. I'm not sure if you can see that, but this is a big, greater article about whatever I just said. So if you missed or if you want to refresh, everything is there. And yeah, I mean, if you have also ideas, I have an open Google Doc where we could collect these ideas and probably put it into this group if that's the right place for it. But I want to pause now because I took probably more than the 20 minutes I thought I will use. But I want to just pause now to really open this forum up about first impressions. What do you feel about it? How much it resonated with you? What if it was not resonating with you? That's also great. And perhaps also briefly about how was your experience dealing with this day in, day out with your teams?
Yeah, very good first, Vivek. This is great stuff, and I like, so maybe first a few comments on my side, and then I would also suggest to do a check-in for everyone, as you suggested. It makes a lot of sense to discuss how everyone feels about it and some ideas and thoughts. First, I feel really here at ease in one sense, just to see, I'm actually happy about seeing that tech leaders like you actually set an example here to look at these different practices of, for instance, self-reflection, right? Or integrating elements like check-ins, check-outs, or gratefulness, right? Being grateful about certain things and actually experimenting with integrating this into the work environment. And this is actually what all this community, when I founded it last year, is about, is basically a platform to create these discussions and share resources like these, right? Make them actionable. I'm usually really a friend of actionable content that you can actually take and then actually implement, right? Because from that, what you have shared, it's also very concrete. Um, People can look at it and then see what resonates. And if some idea, like let's say the self-reflection idea resonates, yeah, let's try it out, see what happens. So this is great. And I think this is the also direction, and I like in terms of this community here and this forum is it was always one of the key purpose of the Fellowship of Mindful Tech Leaders was around sharing best practices on mindful leadership, right? On mindful tech leadership. And usually finding a forum for this is not that easy, right? Because in the work environment, you're usually too much driven and focus on the actual product development, on the business aspects. And if you actually have a meeting with your leadership team, the topics there are usually also more oriented to whatever goals and stuff and policies and procedures, processes, whatever. But of course, there's always an effort everyone can make in a leadership team to also look at other topics that are going on. But if you then want to spread it out across different organizations, which is happening here, I thought that this is perfect, and we can learn from each other. We can just exchange these ideas, and by doing these little things step by step, I think this is how to change the workplace for the better, right? And with that comment, I would um, maybe have one question or two. Um, Hopefully short ones. I think you mentioned a little bit in terms of measuring impact, which I liked since I'm usually the KPI guy. I like always to look at some numbers and how can I see that this is working, which is tough in some of these instances, but it's doable. So maybe a quick thing um, on that one. And I think another question around yeah, how can you keep this up as a focus areas, and basically also evangelize and help other leaders to basically look at some of these ideas and look at these examples and basically take advantage of it. Is it hard doing it within the company, getting others to also embrace some of these things? Maybe that's my second question, and I think, yeah, please.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for the comments, Rainer. I'll be precise. So first, KPIs and impact, absolutely. I'm a big fan of it. I would say it's obviously very hard to do that inside the organization I work with. We obviously have instruments to capture that on a quarterly basis. I know Arman is aware of it, and also Rainer from your experience. But what we also do is do this check-ins on a smaller group level, which is the one-on-one checks or skip level checks that we do, where we talk about uh, how closely they feel motivated to continue in their current work that they're doing. Do they have close aid and group of people in the group to share their concerns? What was level of anxiety? I think we do it very informally today. We mostly rely on this global organization level checks that is quarterly. I'm happy to say that at least so far, doing this exercise for the last 6 months, uh, there has been peaks in the organizational checks around how the team is doing. And I connect that to having these exercises with my team. Obviously, there are other aspects that influence that. Um, and other things is just doing SAT checks on a with your team members on a one-on basis. That would be for I think, a subjective way of collecting data and seeing where things are going or not. From the point of evangelizing this topic, I don't think it's harder to do so in an organization like ours. However, I don't think we should wait for it to be a globally adopted process to apply it locally. So I'm a big fan of, think globally, act locally. So try to do something, talk to people. So I have catch-ups with other leaders in my organization in an informal way, like once a week or once a month. And I tell them I listen to them, what they are doing, how they are dealing with this. And we share some of this thought process around it. So it's more an exchange that we do on a leadership level that allows me to share their ideas with them. And I am happy that some of my peers in the group have accepted this and they are trying to experiment. And I think the idea is that um, as more leaders become comfortable with this, because it's not easy. A lot of leaders haven't even gone through that route. So as they become comfortable, this becomes easy for them to practice in their teams. But the good point is, I think it's easier to talk about. I think it's easier to talk about it than doing. So it's what I do, and I'm doing this experiment in the next month, is to invite other leaders in this exchange. So I've done this from one of my design teams. I asked them to actually come in to this exchange one time a week or one time bi-weekly we do it, and just to participate as another person in the team. And what they do is they participate in the discussion or the engagement, both from gratefulness and the self-reflection, share out, and they share feedback, and they take what they saw and try to either practice the same or do it differently. So I think the good part is not to just tell them what to do, but actually bring them in, let them participate. So that for me is a great form of evangelizing here.
Very good. Thanks, Vivek. And I think let's open up. We have 5 more minutes
Sure.
for others to check in. I suggested how you feel about it in the current moment, and maybe one thought, comment, or question.
I'll go first. Hey, thanks, Vivek. Thanks for the wonderful presentation, and also a couple of ideas that you brought in. So in my team, we used to have this self-reflection process, and we tried it out almost 3-4 weeks back, and it had been working out, but I'm not sure, as you said, right, these KPIs. This is something that I have not thought through, means in terms of checking in, checking out. And I'm just trying to find out, is there a way where I can have a very clear cut KPI, since we started off just a couple of weeks back, and it's going through certain iterations in the way how people open up, they talk about their feelings. Because uh, with a team, and that too slightly larger team, it's a little difficult that people open up in the very first 2 3 instances. It takes some time for them to get adjusted. Oh, there's something that's gonna help me out.
Mm,
So that's one challenge that I had. But something that I feel like gratitude, that would be a very good exercise to start off. We don't do that as of this time. We do have certain from an organization side,
mm.
but from a team perspective, I think so. I would try to exercise that. Get back with some feedback.
Thank you, Abhishek. I have just one comment. I think from a point of KPIs and tracking, there are wonderful resources. I'm happy to share some of with you and the others.
Mhm.
I also happen to run into a group called Gallup, those who are behind the Strengths Finder.
Thanks,
So
man.
they have a great set of questions. Like, I mean, some are very cheesy, but you get the feel of it. Like, for example, do you have a close friend at work? Right? For example, this is one of the questions that they ask to teams. I mean, the intention is not like really need a friend at work, but basically, do you have someone who you can really relate to or confide in, right?
Mhm.
And I think there are some other questions in that group. I think Arman, I'm not sure if you were a part of that exercise sometime back in our organization, but I really found some of them were really valuable, and it's openly available if you kind of join Gallup.
Mhm.
And yeah, I would keep it that, but I'm happy to share more resource. Let me help.
So maybe I will speak now if we have a few minutes more. Vivek, thank you very much. So I recently joined this fellowship. One thing that struck the most is basically having the possibility for people to open. Like people don't, like at least the people that I'm working with, it's not about age, it's not about awareness. I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe the amount of distraction that we're having nowadays, that it's hard to stop and reflect. Like I wouldn't also reflect like 6 months ago. Now I do that. That's why like looking at your presentation, Vivek, also give me a little bit more awareness and ideas. The one thing that I would like to share is like at company, we have like our internal tool where we appreciate each other, where we send appreciation via, I don't know, like a message. And then we have a leaderboard, and the winners get the people who received or who sent get some like unicorn or Care Bear. This bound a little bit, like a built little bit of this appreciation and relation to each other. And I found it super difficult on the meetings like retrospective or something to say loud appreciation for others. But what I see, because like people are using this software because they feel like, like it's not face to face, and people are embarrassed to talk about the feelings, which I found really challenging right now. So thanks. I'm hoping basically I will get some more ideas how can I encourage to get people a little bit more open.
Thank you so much for your comments. Can I just ask you, how do I pronounce your first name?
Yes, my name is Grzegorz.
Gregor.
Thank
So
you.
really valuable comments. I just want to share one small thing. You're right. It's very difficult for people to open up. I think there's a spectrum of people. Some people like to talk about stuff. Some people like to write. Some people are happy to share in a one-on-one manner, but not in a group. I think we need to embrace that. So instead of making it like, okay, you need to do it in this group, done, make it flexible. So if you can write it, drop an email, have it in one-on-one. Don't need to have a group. I think the point is to start somewhere and to go forward from there. And I think what you're doing is great because you're leveraging something that already exists like a tool. So thank you for sharing that.
Very good. Maybe Arman, you have some thought about it.
Sure. I'd like to thank both of you as well. I'm very happy to see you, Raina and Vivek, after quite a while. And I'm also very pleased to meet the other fellow members of this round. And Vivek, as always, is very insightful. So I learned from him.
Likewise.
And I particularly like this idea of focus on, when a setup change or the modality change, what are some of the things that are missing now? One of them can be, when you come out from one meeting room, going to another meeting room, what does that function as, and how can you replace it with something? Another thing that I sometimes feel is missing is actually the chit chat and the small talk, right? Or the coffee kind of chat or the water cooler chat. And that's, although I'm not a sort of a small talk type of a person, I did realize it. So when we started sort of daily morning stand-ups, but we consciously, purposefully tried to open up our day, not with work, but with general observations for the first, especially for the first few months. We were just looking at numbers, checking in, what kind of worries and what kind of perceptions exist. And we spent a good chunk of time, sometimes 10, 20 minutes, just, talking about non-work related stuff so that we can balance things out. After a while, everyone kind of mastered the situation, and then we went more and more back to the work related stuff. But I feel in our experience, that was also very useful and quite compatible with some of the ideas you put out. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Arman.
Very good. We're a little bit over time. Is there maybe one additional thought, question, comment I think we could squeeze in? If not, we would conclude. Up to you.
I think if you have more questions, I'm happy to discuss this. I can put the article and the post on our community,
Please,
and please feel free to share your what works for you. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm an experimenter. I love experiments, so it's good to learn from each one of you how it works. So I'm happy to continue the conversations online.
Yeah, definitely, and use the explore all of you explore a little bit with this platform, the community. It has really cool features in terms of chat, follows. All the stuff that you used in terms of social media, but without the noise, right? The idea is that this platform, you'll keep it clean. Right? There is basically quality content in there that, like this here, right? Stuff that matters, and there is no ads or any of these other things. We'll keep these things very simple. There's also, in terms of the audience, right? There is tech leaders are there in all different levels. They're global, diverse. That's also the idea, right? And we have a few experts in here. So there's a few, for instance, mindfulness experts, but neurofeedback, and there's all kind of other experts that you get to know over time who basically can contribute relevant ideas. So definitely encourage you play a little bit with the platform. some of the functionality or content is a little bit hidden, but once you get used to it. For instance, I use the app. That's another key thing. Download the app that you get up-to-date information like meeting invites or all those things just in the convenience of the smartphone, and then you can read articles like on the go. Sometimes it's helpful. So yeah, I think that's my final words, and thanks everyone for being here, and of course special thanks to Vivek for sharing all this good stuff. We're looking forward to some of the write-up. That's for sure is a good thing with the some action items, and I'll share probably by tomorrow also this recording here. So for others who couldn't make it, there was one quick question, one last one from Dushyantin, because over chat which just came in, I think to close this up, I would say let's do this quick question here. The question was on remote team management. If Vivek had any insights, experience on how to bring them together. So it's about bringing the team together over, maybe that's a very quick thing so that we can round it up with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very loaded question. We can spend hours talking about it. I would say I want a couple of points on this. One is I'm a big fan of some rituals, and obviously not doing the ritual for the sake of doing ritual, but it builds that kind of pattern. So building rituals, flexible timing, and also realizing and trusting your teams that they are doing a great job wherever they are and whatever time that you want to do. So obviously helps. And I think there are fantastic books, like I think from the people behind Basecamp. I think Remote has been a fantastic book. I think the people at GitLab, for example, often share great insights on how they run a remote team from beginning, one automatic behind WordPress. I think this is a question that should be discussed on the group because it's such a beautiful question and a loaded question.
And I think actually, thanks. I think this is actually a question we're gonna for a whole episode, as you suggested. And if you share those two things, these books you mentioned, as also part of the notes, that could be helpful. It's always good to find some good books to read and explore. But and on the other hand, of course, you don't want to add more books to your queue, Vivek.
It's a fun fact, but I love doing it. My wife is not happy; it occupies space. But yeah, it's a good thing. I don't kind of feel bad about doing that.
No, it's a good thing. Actually, see, the good thing is actually once you have compiled all these books, and then the shelves are growing. And then sometimes it's good because if you, for instance, if you meditate and you're, it's more quiet, relaxed, maybe on some rainy afternoon, right? You sit there, you meditate, and then sometimes it could be that something is drawing you actually then to this one particular book, and then you can pick it and maybe read a few pages. You don't have to read the whole book. So this is one of the things I'm doing as well, since I also have lots of books basically, right? And sometimes it's a good thing you just have them sitting there, and at the right moment and the right time, you have access to it. Right?
True.
Very good. So thanks again for everyone. Thanks, Vivek. We'll wrap up. There will be the next meeting coming up in 2 weeks from now. You'll see the invite and the event. And all of you have a good evening, and talk to you then.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.